Story Overview: The Nightmare in Rowland Heights. In the calm suburban streets of Rowland Heights, Los Angeles, a nightmare was unfolding, one that would shock a community and expose the dark underbelly of bullying among international students. Yiran, a young Chinese student, found himself trapped in a terrifying world of cruelty orchestrated by a group of his own peers. At the center of this storm was Zhan Yunyao, a fierce, volatile girl whose charm masked a ruthless, violent streak. She wasn't just any bully. She was the leader of a pack that would stop at nothing to break their victims. On a cold night in March 2015, Lu was lured into a trap, a calculated, merciless plan. Over 10 students gathered, fueled by anger and jealousy, and unleashed horrors no one should ever endure. They smashed his phone, beat him mercilessly, forced him to kneel and endure slap after slap. They burned his chest with cigarette butts, forced him to eat his own hair, and pressed his face into dirt and sand. The torment lasted hours, captured coldly on cell phone cameras, turning the park into a cage of fear. Lu never cried. His silence only fueled their cruelty. But this nightmare wasn't born overnight. It was the product of years of unchecked violence, silence from the school administration, and a culture of entitlement wrapped in wealth and power. Oxford School, a small private institution catering to Chinese and Korean students, looked the other way, more interested in tuition checks than in protecting vulnerable kids. Zhan Yunyao's story is one of privilege twisted by rage. A wealthy Shanghai transplant, she flaunted luxury cars and a glamorous life online, but her temper and violent outbursts hid a storm beneath the surface. With friends who followed her every command, she ruled with fear. When the police finally intervened, the bullies' arrogance was palpable. They thought they could bribe their way out, shrug off their crimes as childish fights, and move on. One even demanded to hurry home for her birthday party, mocking the seriousness of the charges. But justice in America does not bend to privilege or intimidation. The law struck hard and fast. Lu's bravery in standing up shattered the illusion of impunity. His story revealed more than a brutal attack, it exposed a broken system, a community silenced by fear, and the urgent need for change. This is a story of violence and resilience. Of a boy who refused to be broken, and a society forced to confront its darkest truths. What follows is the full story, the cruelty, the pain, and the fight for justice that no one. Chapter 1, The Calm Before the Storm, Introduction to the Students and Setting. In the quiet suburban community of Rowland Heights, nestled in the sprawling metropolis of Los Angeles, a seemingly ordinary group of international students attended a small private school named Oxford School. The school was modest, just a few classrooms tucked behind a shopping center, with basic sports facilities and an annual tuition of $13,000. Most students were recent immigrants from China or Korea, many with limited English skills and uncertain academic goals. For some, the school was a stepping stone, for others, a place of struggle and social challenges. Among the students was Yiran, a soft-spoken, reserved young man who had traveled thousands of miles to pursue education and build a new life in America. Lu was diligent and careful, aware of the difficulties that came with being far from home, in a foreign culture where he had to navigate language barriers and unfamiliar social rules. He hoped to keep a low profile and focus on his studies, but fate had other plans. On the other side of the social spectrum was Zhan Yunyao, a girl whose presence in the school was impossible to ignore. At 19, Zhan was the unofficial leader of a tight-knit group of friends, a clique known for their hot tempers, sharp tongues, and a penchant for violence. Originally from Shanghai, Zhan came from a wealthy family and flaunted her lifestyle openly on social media. Photos with luxury cars, expensive brands, and glamorous parties painted the picture of a life far removed from the struggles of most of her classmates. But beneath the surface lurked a volatile personality. Her temper was legendary. Teachers described her as polite and respectful toward American staff but ruthless toward other students, especially girls she deemed weak or disobedient. Zhan's history of violence stretched back years, with numerous incidents of bullying and physical assault. One victim, Mai Jai, bore the brunt of her cruelty. Mai had once tried to stop Zhan from attacking another student and was punished for her bravery with an hour-long beating and cigarette burns on her arm. Mai's swollen face forced her to wear a mask for weeks. Zhan's entourage included Zhang Xinlei, her boyfriend, and Yang Yuhan, all adults who enabled her reign of intimidation. Their bullying wasn't random but calculated. They preyed on classmates who showed weakness, often waiting near the school gates or social gatherings to ambush them. Rumors circulated that Zhan's group had little regard for consequences, their wealth and connections making them feel untouchable. They openly mocked anyone who crossed them, fueling a culture of fear. Lu and Zhan's paths had crossed before, and not peacefully. Teachers recalled times when Zhan threatened Lu, scaring him enough to miss school days. Just weeks before the attack, Lu had been beaten again, with Zhan present, yet the school did nothing. The administration, many suspected, cared more about tuition fees from wealthy international families than disciplining disruptive students. Whispers among staff suggested a willful blindness to maintain enrollment. The tension between Lu and Zhan simmered quietly, like a dormant volcano ready to erupt. Lu feared confrontation but stood his ground as best he could. Meanwhile, Zhan's anger and frustration grew, fueled by her unstable relationships and a temper that sometimes flared into violence at the slightest provocation. This was the setting in which a brutal storm would soon break, one that would shatter illusions of safety, expose the dark side of bullying in immigrant communities, and challenge the idea that money and influence could shield anyone from justice. Underscore 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 underscore. Chapter 2, The Attack, The Horrifying Ordeal. On the evening of March 30, 2015, the calm surface of Rowland Heights was shattered by a violent and calculated act of cruelty. Yiran, unaware of the trap awaiting him, had agreed to meet an old classmate named Lu Wanqing. The invitation came with vague promises, "Let's talk about something," but something felt off. Sensing potential trouble, Lu brought along a male friend for support, hoping safety in numbers would protect him. The meeting point was a quiet corner of Rowland Heights Park, a small green space often used by students after school. When Lu and his friend arrived, Lu Wanqing was there as expected. However, before long, Zhan Yunyao appeared. With a cold smile and commanding tone, she waved Lu's friend away. "This is a private conversation between girls," she said, forcing him to leave. A sinking feeling took hold of Lu. This was no ordinary chat. Within minutes, several other students emerged, all part of Zhan's notorious clique. The circle tightened around Lu like a noose. Suddenly, the pretense dissolved, replaced by raw aggression. Phones were pulled out, not to document a friendly gathering but to capture something sinister. Zhan ordered one of her friends to smash Lu's phone to bits, an act symbolic of cutting off communication and support. Then the physical assault began. Lu was shoved into a corner, his back pressed against the cold concrete wall. He was forced to kneel, powerless and exposed. Slaps rained down on him, 1, 2, then dozens, over 100, each sting echoing like a judgment. The group laughed and jeered, feeding off his humiliation. Cold water was poured on him, drenching his clothes and skin, making the chills sting deeper than the bruises. Yang Yuhan, one of the main accomplices, ripped off Lu's shirt and burned his chest with a cigarette, the pain sharp and relentless. Another girl, Bai Jiazi, tried to set fire to his hair, but the wetness saved him from that fate. Not satisfied, Zhan instructed Zhang Xinlei to fetch scissors from home. When Zhang returned, Lu's fate worsened. His hair was cut against his will, clumps falling to the ground like discarded hopes. Zhan forced him to eat the hair, an act designed to degrade and dehumanize. Others pushed his face into the dirt, making him swallow sand and earth, mixing pain with disgust. This torment stretched on for 5 brutal hours, hours filled with violence, fear, and despair. The attackers took turns, never tiring of their cruelty. At times, they paused to record the abuse on their phones, as if the ordeal was entertainment to be shared and relived. Throughout it all, Lu refused to cry or show weakness. His silent endurance seemed to enrage his tormentors even more, driving them to escalate the abuse. From roughly 7 p.m. until well past midnight, they continued their vicious game. When Lu could barely stand, bloodied and broken, the attackers finally relented. They allowed him to dress, but not without further humiliation. They made him drive them home. At the wheel, he obeyed like a puppet, trapped by fear and exhaustion. Before parting ways, Zhan delivered a chilling warning: if you report this, say it was Lu Xinghua who hit you. We 12 will all testify against you. No one will believe you. But Lu's courage was stronger than their threats. The next morning, he went straight to the police and told the truth. Chapter 3, The Aftermath, Police, Trial, and the Law. When Lu Yiran stepped into the local police station the morning after the attack, he carried more than just bruises and cuts. He carried the heavy burden of fear and the hope for justice. Despite Zhan Yunyao's threats that no one would believe him, Lu knew the truth had to be told. Officers were initially shocked by the extent of Lu's injuries. His face was swollen beyond recognition, eyes nearly shut from the blows. Cuts and burn marks peppered his body, some still raw and oozing. He struggled to stand as he recounted the night's horrors with remarkable composure. The police immediately began their investigation. Within hours, they identified the suspects, mostly students from the same school, familiar faces in the small community. 12 students were implicated, and by the next day, 6 were arrested, including 3 minors. The main suspects, Zhan Yunyao, Yang Yuhan, and Zhang Xinlei, were adults and taken into custody. At first, the arrested students were defiant. They insisted on their innocence, claiming they were framed and that the charges were false. Zhan and her friends maintained an air of arrogance, convinced that their wealth and connections would shield them. They joked about settling the matter quietly, as if the brutal assault was nothing more than a petty scuffle. But the evidence told a starkly different story. Medical professionals assessed Lu's injuries, rating his pain on a scale of 1 to 10, a standard in American healthcare. Lu's pain levels registered consistently above 7, with some injuries scoring a full 10, signaling extreme, nearly unbearable suffering. Photographs of his wounds, the burn scars, and swelling were damning. The police collected the videos recorded by the attackers themselves, unintended evidence of their cruelty. Witnesses came forward, including other students who had suffered at Zhan's hands in the past. During the trial, the defendants continued to underestimate the seriousness of their actions. Zhan, displaying a disturbing sense of entitlement, reportedly said, "Hurry up and let me go home, don't delay my 19th birthday party." She seemed to believe the legal system would be as malleable as back home, where money and influence often smoothed over wrongdoing. However, the U.S. justice system operates differently. Judges and prosecutors laid out the facts clearly: bullying that escalated into physical torture and emotional abuse could not be tolerated. The court made it clear that wealth and privilege offered no immunity. One by one, the defendants faced the weight of the law. Their denials crumbled under the overwhelming evidence. The judge condemned their behavior, highlighting not only the physical harm caused to Lu but also the psychological trauma inflicted. The verdict was a decisive blow to their arrogance. Sentences included incarceration, probation, and mandatory counseling. Zhan and her accomplices were forced to confront the reality that their actions had serious consequences far beyond a simple schoolyard fight. For Lu, the trial was both a painful reminder and a measure of justice. Though the scars on his body would heal with time, the emotional wounds lingered. Still, knowing that the law stood with him offered a glimmer of hope. The case sent ripples through the local community and the wider international student population. It served as a harsh lesson: bullying and abuse are crimes, and no culture or status places someone above the law. Chapter 4: The School's Role, Neglect, Pressure, and the Culture of Silence. The attack on Lu Yiran was not an isolated event but the climax of a toxic atmosphere simmering within Oxford School, a small private institution tucked behind a shopping center in Rowland Heights. With a modest campus consisting of a handful of classrooms and limited facilities, Oxford School catered primarily to Chinese and Korean students who often struggled with English proficiency and had unclear academic goals. Tuition fees of $13,000 per year made it a lucrative business, and the school's administration appeared more focused on revenue than student welfare. Teachers recalled that disciplinary actions were rare, and when complaints arose, especially those involving bullying, they often went unaddressed. Lu's ordeal was a glaring example. He was not the first victim. Zhan Yunyao had a history of violent behavior. Years before the infamous attack, she had assaulted another Chinese student, Mai Jia. When Mai tried to intervene during one of Zhan's violent outbursts, she was threatened and later beaten herself, with cigarette burns left on her arm. Mai began wearing a mask to school to hide her bruised face, a silent testament to the school's failure. Several other students shared similar stories of abuse, attacks motivated by minor slights, insults, or simply Zhan's unpredictable mood swings. The school gates became a battleground, where Zhan's group would ambush victims and then wait to retaliate even more harshly if victims tried to seek help or avoid confrontation. Teachers who witnessed these incidents often felt powerless. Many believed the principal was unwilling to act because of the school's reliance on tuition from wealthy Chinese families. The priority was to keep enrollment numbers high, and discipline was seen as a threat to that goal. The relationship between teachers and students was complicated. While Zhan and her friends were reportedly polite and respectful to white teachers, they bullied weaker classmates mercilessly. Several teachers remembered how Yiran had been scared into skipping school after receiving threats from Zhan. Despite reports and complaints, no significant intervention occurred. Weeks before the attack, Lu was again assaulted, with Zhan present. A teacher filed a report, but no action was taken. The pattern of neglect allowed Zhan's violence to escalate unchecked. Social media also revealed a troubling image of Zhan's life outside school. She flaunted her affluent background, photos with luxury cars like BMWs and Maseratis, sarcastic remarks mocking peers who owned less expensive vehicles. Her volatile temperament extended to her personal relationships. After a breakup, she even attempted suicide. Zhang Xinlei, her then-boyfriend, was deeply involved in the attack on Lu, revealing how tightly knit this toxic group was. Host families who took in Zhan described her as unmanageable. She often stayed out late, lied frequently, and caused significant stress. They were not surprised by her arrest but concerned about the missed warning signs. The school's failure to create a safe environment allowed bullying to flourish. Instead of protecting vulnerable students, it became a place where violence was ignored or even tacitly encouraged by silence. This chapter highlights the systemic issues within the school, where profit motives, cultural misunderstandings, and administrative negligence combine to create a dangerous environment. It also raises critical questions about the responsibility of educational institutions to protect all students, regardless of background or status. Chapter 5. Reflection and Impact, Lessons from a Tragic Case. The story of Yiran's brutal assault by Zhan Yunyao and her group sent shockwaves far beyond the confines of Rowland Heights. It exposed painful truths about bullying, cultural clashes, and the challenges faced by international students adapting to a new environment. For Lu, the road to recovery was long and painful, not only physically but emotionally. The scars left by the violence and betrayal by peers lingered in his mind. Yet, his courage to come forward and seek justice became a beacon of hope for others trapped in silence. His bravery challenged the false notion that money or status could shield perpetrators from consequences. The court's firm judgment against Zhan and her accomplices sent a clear message: the U.S. legal system would not tolerate bullying and abuse. The defendants' arrogance, rooted in misguided assumptions about influence and privilege, was shattered. Their reckoning was a harsh but necessary lesson that cruelty has real consequences. The case also sparked discussions about the responsibilities of schools hosting international students. Oxford School's failure to protect its vulnerable students drew sharp criticism. It highlighted the urgent need for better supervision, anti-bullying policies, and culturally sensitive support systems. Schools must balance financial goals with the duty to provide a safe learning environment. This incident also illuminated deeper cultural misunderstandings. Some argued that certain behaviors were dismissed as normal in students' home countries, yet they were unacceptable and illegal in their new context. It underscored the importance of educating international students not only academically but also about the laws, rights, and social norms of their host country. Community organizations and educators took note, pushing for stronger integration programs, counseling services, and channels for students to report abuse safely. Many families, shaken by the case, became more vigilant about their children's welfare and social circles abroad. Zhan Yunyao's story became a cautionary tale about unchecked aggression and the perils of entitlement. Her once glamorous social media image crumbled, replaced by infamy and legal consequences. It served as a stark reminder that wealth and bravado do not exempt one from accountability. For the broader community, the case prompted reflection on how bullying can escalate into horrific violence when ignored. It challenged parents, teachers, and students alike to take bullying seriously and support victims courageously. Ultimately, Lu's ordeal, and his refusal to remain silent, became a catalyst for change. It opened eyes to the dark corners of international student life, where pressure, isolation, and cultural barriers sometimes breed violence. The hope is that his story will inspire safer schools, stronger communities, and a world where no one suffers in silence. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling stories.